You check your phone, even when there's no notification. Just in case you missed something. Then you check again. Not because something happened, but because it feels like something might. Like something is about to shift. Even when everything is quiet, you don't feel calm. You feel like you're waiting. For a message. A problem. A change. Anything. You try to relax. But your body stays alert. Like it doesn't trust the moment. Like something is already on its way to interrupt it. And most of the time, nothing actually happens. But that doesn't change the feeling. You can be in a good moment, and still feel like it won't last. So you don't fully enjoy it. You stay a little ready. A little tense. Just in case. And after a while, this becomes normal. Not because things are always going wrong. But because you never feel like they won't. It's not just the big moments. It's the small ones. The ones that are supposed to feel normal, easy, safe. Like when you finally finish everything you had to do. You sit down. Nothing urgent. No messages. No pressure. And instead of feeling relief, you feel something else. A quiet tension. You open your phone again. Scroll a little. Lock it. Then unlock it again. Not because you need to. Because something in you feels like you should. Like you might be missing something. Like something could have changed in those few seconds. And you don't even question it anymore. It just feels natural. You call it checking. But it's not really about checking. It's about not fully trusting that things are okay. Even when they are. And this doesn't just happen when you're alone. It happens when you're with people too. You're having a normal conversation. Nothing wrong. Nothing tense. And still, a part of you is scanning. The tone. The pauses. The way they respond. You notice small things. A delayed reply. A different expression. A shift in energy. Things most people would ignore. But you don't. Because for you, those small things don't feel small. They feel like signs. Like something underneath is changing. Even if you can't explain what. So you stay alert. Not visibly. No one would look at you and think something is wrong. You smile. You respond. You stay present. But inside, there's a constant monitoring. Like you're waiting for something to reveal itself. Something that would confirm what you already feel. That something is about to go wrong. And the strange part is, most of the time, nothing does. The conversation ends normally. The person stays the same. Nothing breaks. But your body doesn't register that. It doesn't relax. It just resets, and waits again. And over time, this becomes your default state. You don't even notice it clearly anymore. Because it's always been there. That slight tension. That subtle expectation. That feeling that something, at some point, will shift. And because of that, you start doing something without realizing. You don't fully arrive in moments. Even when something good is happening, you hold back a little. Not in a dramatic way. Just enough to not feel too comfortable. You laugh, but not completely. You enjoy, but not deeply. You connect, but with a small distance. Like there's always a part of you that stays slightly outside the experience. Observing. Waiting. Just in case. Because fully relaxing would mean trusting. And trusting feels risky. Not because something is wrong right now, but because it might be. And that might is enough. Enough to keep your body slightly tense. Enough to keep your attention divided. Enough to stop you from settling into what's actually happening. And sometimes, it shows up in even simpler ways. You're watching something. Trying to relax. But you pause it. Check something else. Come back. Pause again. It's not restlessness exactly. It's like your system doesn't fully allow you to drop. Like it needs to stay a little active. A little prepared. As if being completely at ease would leave you unprotected. And you don't consciously think that. You don't say to yourself, something bad is about to happen. It's quieter than that. It's just a feeling. A background expectation. That things don't stay good for long. So you adapt. You become someone who doesn't fully settle. Someone who is always a little ready. Even when there's nothing to be ready for. And after a while, you stop questioning it. Because it feels like awareness. Like you're just being attentive. Like you're just paying attention to reality. But if you look closely, it's not really about what's happening. It's about what you feel could happen. And that difference changes everything. Because it means you're not responding to the moment. You're responding to an expectation. One that doesn't need evidence. One that shows up on its own. Quietly. Consistently. And once it's there, it's hard to ignore. Even when everything around you is completely fine. And maybe the most confusing part is this: you don't even know when it started. It just feels like it's always been there. Like this is just how you are. Like this is just how your mind works. But what if it isn't? What if this constant sense that something is about to go wrong isn't coming from what's happening now, but from something that feels familiar, even when nothing is actually wrong? There's a moment you probably don't remember clearly. Not one specific event. Not something obvious. Just a pattern. Something that repeated quietly. Where things felt okay, and then suddenly, they weren't. No warning. No explanation. Just a shift. Maybe it was in the way someone spoke to you. One day they were warm. The next, distant. Or distracted. Or irritated in a way you didn't understand. And you noticed. Even if no one explained it. Even if no one said anything directly. You felt it. That difference. That subtle change in energy. And because you didn't have words for it, you started paying attention in another way. You started watching. Not consciously. But carefully. Trying to understand what changed. What caused it. What you might have done. Because if you could understand it, maybe you could prevent it next time. So you became more aware. More attentive. More tuned into small shifts. You learned to notice tone. Silence. Timing. Not as something interesting. But as something important. Something that meant something. Because in your experience, things didn't always stay stable. They changed. Without warning. And when they did, it mattered. So your system adapted. Not by shutting down. But by staying ready. Ready to notice. Ready to react. Ready to adjust. And over time, that readiness became constant. It didn't turn on only when something felt off. It stayed on. even when things were calm, even when nothing was happening. Because for you, calm didn't mean safe. It meant temporary. A phase. Something that would eventually shift. So instead of relaxing into it, you stayed aware of it. Like you were tracking something invisible. Something that hadn't happened yet, but felt possible. And this didn't just happen in one type of situation. It spread. From one environment, into everything else. From one relationship, into all relationships. From one moment, into your general way of being. So even now, in completely different contexts, your body reacts the same way. It doesn't ask, is something wrong right now? It asks, what if something changes? And that question doesn't need an answer. It's enough on its own. Enough to create tension. Enough to keep you slightly alert. And the more this repeats, the more automatic it becomes. You don't sit and analyze. You don't think it through. You just feel it. That quiet sense, that something isn't fully settled. Even when everything looks stable. And that's why it's so hard to explain. Because from the outside, nothing is happening. There's no clear problem. No visible threat. No reason to be tense. But inside, there's movement. A subtle anticipation. Like your system is preparing for something. Before it arrives. And the strange thing is, this once made sense. At some point, being attentive helped you. It helped you avoid conflict. Avoid surprises. Avoid feeling caught off guard. It gave you a sense of control. Or at least, the feeling of being less vulnerable. Because if you noticed early, you could adjust early. You could prepare. You could protect yourself. And that mattered. It mattered enough. That your system kept doing it. Again and again. Until it became your default. But now, the context is different. You're not in the same situations. Not with the same people. Not in the same environment. And yet, the response stayed. Because it's no longer about the situation. It's about the pattern. A pattern that doesn't wait for confirmation. It activates first, and looks for meaning later. So even in moments where nothing is shifting, you feel like something might. Even when someone is consistent, you look for inconsistency. Even when things are steady, you expect change. And not just any change. A negative one. A disruptive one. Something that would confirm that the calm wasn't real. And because of that, you don't experience calm as calm. You experience it as a pause. A space before something else. And that changes the way you live inside your own moments. Because instead of being in them, you're slightly ahead of them. Trying to predict. Trying to anticipate. Trying to stay one step in front. Of something that hasn't even happened. And maybe won't. But your system doesn't work with certainty. It works with possibility. And if something feels possible, it treats it as relevant. As something to prepare for. Even if the probability is low. Even if there's no real evidence. Because for you, evidence wasn't always clear. Things changed without warning. Without logic. Without explanation. So now, you don't wait for evidence. You respond to the feeling. And that feeling becomes your reality. Even when the moment itself is completely stable. And if you slow down just a little, you might start to notice something. This sense that something will go wrong doesn't actually come from what's happening now. It shows up Before anything changes. Before anything shifts. Before anything breaks. Which means, it's not a reaction. It's something else. Something that's already there. Something that arrives first. And then looks for confirmation. And once you begin to see that, a different kind of question starts to form. Not, what's about to go wrong? But, why does it feel like something will, even when nothing is? And this is where it starts to shape your life, in ways that don't look obvious at first. Because you're not reacting to something happening. You're reacting to something that might. And that changes how you move through everything. Even in simple moments. Like when someone takes a little longer to reply. Nothing unusual. People get busy. They forget. They answer later. But for you, that gap doesn't feel neutral. It feels loaded. You read into it. Not dramatically. Just enough to start wondering. Did something change? Did I say something wrong? Are they pulling away? And once that question appears, it doesn't leave easily. You check again. And again. Even when you know it's too early. Even when you know there's no real reason. Because the feeling is already there. That subtle sense, that something is shifting. And your mind starts trying to make sense of it. Looking back at what you said. Replaying small details. Trying to find something that explains it. Because not knowing feels worse than assuming. So you assume. Not out of logic, but out of familiarity. You've felt this before. That same tension. That same uncertainty. And your system treats it like something important. Something to pay attention to. Something to solve. And this doesn't only happen with messages. It happens in conversations too. You're talking to someone. Everything seems normal. And then, something small catches your attention. A change in tone. A shorter response. A pause that feels slightly different. And suddenly, you're no longer fully in the conversation. Part of you steps back. Starts observing. Trying to read between the lines. Trying to understand what changed. Even if nothing actually did. And from the outside, nothing is wrong. But inside, you're already adjusting. Maybe you speak a little differently. Maybe you hold something back. Maybe you become more careful. Not in a conscious way. Just enough to avoid whatever it is that might be coming. And over time, this becomes automatic. You don't notice when it starts. You just feel yourself shifting. Adapting. Staying one step ahead. But always in response. To something that hasn't happened yet. And this pattern shows up. In moments that should feel good too. Like when something finally goes right. You get good news. Something works out. Things feel stable for once. And instead of fully enjoying it, you hesitate. Just a little. Like you don't fully trust it. Like it might not last. So you don't let yourself settle. You stay slightly alert. Even in the middle of something positive. Because part of you is already preparing. For the moment it changes. And sometimes, that preparation becomes behavior. You might pull back. Without realizing why. You might stop engaging as much. You might create distance, before anything actually shifts. Not because you want to. But because it feels safer. To not be too invested. To not be too present. To not fully lean into something. that might disappear. And this creates something subtle, but powerful. A loop. You expect something to go wrong. So you stay alert. You adjust. You hold back. And that slight distance changes the experience. It affects how you connect, how you respond, how you show up. And sometimes, it even affects how others respond to you. They might feel that distance, that hesitation, that subtle lack of presence. And they adjust too. They might become less expressive, less open, less engaged. Not because something is wrong, but because something feels off. And without realizing it, the thing you were expecting starts to feel real. Not because it was there from the beginning, but because your response slowly shaped the experience. And this is what makes it confusing. Because from your perspective, you were right. Something did change. Something did feel different. Something did shift. But what's harder to see is that the shift didn't start outside. It started inside. With that first feeling. That quiet expectation. That something might go wrong. And once that expectation is there, it begins to influence everything. How you interpret. How you react. How you connect. How you stay, or slowly step back. And the more this repeats, the more real it feels. The more it confirms itself. Until it no longer feels like a pattern. It feels like reality. Like things really do change. Like something always happens. Like calm never lasts. And because of that, you stop questioning the feeling. You trust it. Even when there's no clear reason. Even when nothing has actually happened yet. And maybe this is the part that's hardest to notice. You're not just reacting to life. You're reacting to a version of it that hasn't happened, yet it feels just as real. Just as convincing. Just as present. And as long as that continues, every moment will carry a quiet tension. Not because something is wrong, but because something, in you, feels like it will be. At some point, you start noticing something subtle. This feeling doesn't wait for anything to happen. It shows up first. Before the message. Before the change. Before anything actually shifts. And once it's there, everything else starts to look different. Not because it changed. But because you're already expecting it to. And that expectation is quiet. It doesn't come as a clear thought. It doesn't say, something bad is about to happen. It feels more like a state. A way your body settles. Or doesn't. Because even when things are calm, you don't fully register it as calm. There's always a small part of you that stays ready. Not tense in an obvious way. Just, not fully at ease. Like your system doesn't completely trust the moment. And if you look closely, it's not really about what's happening around you. It's about how your body learned to interpret stability. Because for you, stability didn't always mean safety. Sometimes, it came right before a change. Sometimes, it didn't last. Sometimes, it disappeared without warning. So now, your system treats calm differently. Not as something to relax into. But as something to observe carefully. Something that might shift. And that changes the entire experience of the present. Because instead of arriving in it, you stay slightly outside of it. Watching. Tracking. Preparing. Even if there's nothing to prepare for. And this is where something important becomes clear. You're not reacting to danger. You're reacting to the possibility of it. And your body doesn't make a strong distinction between the two. If something feels possible, it treats it as relevant. As something worth preparing for. Even if it hasn't happened. Even if there's no real sign that it will. Because for your system, certainty isn't required. Familiarity is. And this feeling, this quiet sense that something might go wrong, feels familiar. So it gets prioritized. It gets attention. It becomes the lens through which you experience everything. And once that lens is active, everything starts to pass through it. A delayed message feels like distance. A neutral tone feels like disinterest. A quiet moment feels like tension. Not because those things are true, but because your system is already oriented that way. Already looking for change. Already expecting something beneath the surface. And this is why it's so hard to turn off. Because it doesn't feel like a reaction. It feels like awareness. Like you're just being attentive. Like you're just noticing what's real. But there's a difference. Awareness responds to what is happening. This responds to what could happen. And when those two blend together, it becomes difficult to separate them. You don't know if you're sensing something real, or anticipating something familiar. So you treat both the same. You stay alert. You prepare. You hold back just enough to not be caught off guard. And over time, this creates a kind of internal rhythm. Moments of calm, followed by subtle tension. Moments of connection, followed by quiet distance. Not because anything changed, but because your system doesn't stay settled for long. It resets. Returns to that baseline. That slight expectation. That something might shift. And maybe this is why, even when things go well for a while, it still doesn't fully land. It doesn't register deeply. Because the moment is never experienced on its own. It's always connected to what might come next. To what could interrupt it. To what might change. And that keeps you from fully being in it. Fully feeling it. Fully trusting it. Because trust requires a kind of letting go. A kind of softness. A willingness to not be prepared. And for you, that doesn't come naturally. Not because something is wrong with you. But because your system learned something else. It learned that being prepared mattered. That noticing early mattered. That staying aware mattered. And those things, once had a purpose. They helped you navigate situations that felt unpredictable. They helped you stay one step ahead. They helped you feel less exposed. But now, that same response is applied everywhere. Even where it's not needed. Even where things are stable. Even where nothing is shifting. And that's what creates the tension. Not the moment itself, but the way it's being processed. The way it's being anticipated. The way it's being filtered. Through something that came before. And once you start to see that, something small begins to change. Not immediately. Not completely. But enough to notice. You start to recognize the feeling. When it appears. That quiet alertness. That subtle expectation. And instead of immediately following it, you pause. Just slightly. Long enough to ask something different. Not, what's about to go wrong? But, is something actually happening right now? And sometimes, the answer is simple. No. Nothing is changing. Nothing is shifting. Nothing is wrong. It just feels like it might be. And that distinction, even if it's small, begins to open something. Because it shows you that the feeling is not always coming from the moment. It's arriving before it. And if it arrives before it, then maybe, it doesn't belong to it. And that realization, even if it's quiet, starts to loosen something inside you. Just enough to experience the moment a little differently. Not perfectly, but differently. And that difference is where something new begins. And maybe, nothing needs to change all at once. Because this isn't something you decided. It's something that formed quietly. Over time. Through moments that didn't feel stable. Through shifts that didn't make sense. Through experiences that taught your system to stay ready. So it makes sense that this feeling is still here. That quiet expectation. That subtle tension. That sense that something might go wrong. It didn't come out of nowhere. It came from something that felt real. Something that mattered. And maybe for a long time, it helped you. It helped you stay aware. It helped you notice. It helped you avoid being caught off guard. It gave you a sense of control. Or at least, the feeling of being less exposed. But now, you're starting to see something different. That this same response is still active, even when nothing is happening. Even when things are calm. Even when people are consistent. Even when the moment is stable. And that changes how it feels. Because now it's not protecting you from something real. It's shaping how you experience everything. It's keeping you slightly outside of your own life. Watching it, instead of fully being in it. And maybe you don't notice it in big ways. Maybe it's just in small moments. Moments where you could relax, but don't. Moments where you could trust, but hesitate. Moments where you could enjoy, but hold back just a little. And those small moments add up. They become your normal. A way of being that feels natural, even if it's quietly limiting. Because when you're always a little prepared, you're never fully present. When you're always a little alert, you're never fully at ease. When you're always expecting a shift, you never fully land in what's here. And maybe that's the part that begins to stand out. Not the fear itself, but the distance it creates. That slight gap between you and your experience. That feeling of being there, but not completely. And noticing that doesn't mean forcing yourself to change. It doesn't mean telling yourself to just relax. Or just trust. Because your system doesn't respond to pressure. It responds to recognition. To awareness. To moments where something is seen, without needing to be fixed immediately. And maybe it starts like this: you notice the feeling when it appears. That quiet sense that something might shift. That subtle tension in your body. That urge to check, to scan, to prepare. And instead of immediately following it, you stay with it. Just for a moment. Not trying to remove it. Not trying to replace it. Just noticing. Letting it be there, without letting it take over completely. And in that space, something small begins to change. Because you're no longer inside the reaction. You're observing it. And when you observe something, it loosens slightly. It stops feeling like the only reality. It becomes one part of what's happening, not the whole thing. And from there, something else becomes possible. You begin to notice the moment itself. What's actually happening. Not what might happen. Not what could shift. But what is here, now. The conversation that's still steady. The person who's still present. The silence that isn't actually tension. And those moments might feel unfamiliar. Because they're not filtered through the same expectation. They're just there. Simple. Uncertain, maybe. But not necessarily unsafe. And staying in that space, even for a few seconds longer, starts to feel different. Not comfortable right away. But less driven. Less automatic. Less controlled by that constant anticipation. And over time, those small shifts matter. Not because they eliminate the feeling. But because they change your relationship to it. You no longer have to follow it every time. You no longer have to adjust immediately. You no longer have to prepare for something that hasn't happened. You can stay a little longer in what's actually here. And maybe that's where something new begins. Not in removing the fear, but in not letting it define the moment. Not letting it decide how much you get to feel. How much you get to enjoy. How much you get to be present. Because maybe, things don't need to feel certain for you to stay. Maybe they don't need to feel permanent for you to experience them. Maybe they just need to be here. And maybe, so do you. Even if part of you is still a little unsure. Even if part of you is still waiting. Even if that feeling still shows up sometimes. You don't have to leave the moment. Just because it does. You don't have to step back. Just because it appears. You can stay. Not perfectly. Not completely. But enough. Enough to feel something real. Enough to let the moment exist, without preparing for its end. And maybe that's the shift. Not that nothing will ever go wrong, but that it doesn't have to take you out of what's right here. Because this moment isn't what your body expects. It's just what it is. And maybe, for now, that's enough.